Bonjour and welcome to this beautiful lake in southern France. Our main reason for being here is to show how we tackle very large waters. The lake lies in a picturesque valley which once held a small stream, but it is now dammed at the south end where there is a unique outflow system allowing the stream to continue its course southwards. The original river runs into the northeast corner, and it seems that this lake, which was created about 35 years ago, was originally intended to be a water sports park. On this trip I'm accompanied by a small group of friends who are here to help me field test some new ready-made boilies which have just been put on the market, and this is our second reason for being here. The water has been quite heavily stocked with our chosen quarry, along with numerous other species such as grass carp. The locals tell us that carp have been caught to 25 kilos, which is about 55 pounds. When we first arrived, our main task was to locate fish, and this was done by continued observation and by going out on the boat using the echo sounder, which gives us a good idea of depths and of course snags. It does give us locations of fish sometimes, but of course we can't be sure if they're carp, so it's always best to remember to use the echo sounder for feature finding and not as a fish finder. What we found was very interesting. The lake, compared with most in France, is very shallow. Depths range from 7 feet to about 21 feet at the dam end, and the average is some 10 to 15 feet, so it is very shallow compared with most lakes in France. Winding its way through the valley beneath this water is the old riverbed, which is only now about 3 feet deeper than the rest of the lake. Along this riverbed are numerous snags, small bushes and trees which originally lined the banks of the stream. The rest of the lake is snag free, with a nice flat sandy bottom, so there's no need for very heavy lines. We have split into 3 groups of 2 anglers. My partner is Stefan Ball, an old friend who has been in self-imposed exile from carp fishing for the last 4 years. Steph still prefers the old style of carp fishing, as you can see from his tackle and setup. It will be interesting to see how Steph fares on this very different type of water. This is our second venue of this trip. The first was a lake of about 150 acres near Argenton, about 100 miles north of here. But fishing is not allowed until May the 1st, which surprised us because there's no close season in France. We have always found that by splitting up on waters, it is one of the best ways of locating fish. Once someone has located them, others can move in close by and share the action. At the first water, Ken Bishop was soon into a fish on the far bank, and everything looked good until we discovered that the lake wasn't open for another 10 days. Although the same rules apply to 90% of French carp waters, it is always advisable to find out something about that venue before you visit it, but in this case it wasn't possible. But one thing you must ensure is that you always get a fishing licence before you start fishing. These can be obtained in most fishing tackle shops, or in our case a local bar, where you can also obtain information as to what fish are in the lake and whether anything decent has been caught lately. One thing to always remember is that night fishing is not allowed on most waters in France. During our visit here we did get visited by the police at 1 o'clock in the morning, but fortunately we were not cast out, so there was no problems. As it happened, we were not sorry to move, and Dave Powell was soon into our first fish. Dave is from Bristol, and he's been a carp angler for more than 15 years, having caught many 30-pounders. Recently, his business commitments have stopped him fishing, so this too is his first trip for a long time.
Oh, blimey, don't ever give up. Bloody thing in. This is my first French carp, and it's hard work. I'm giving this a fair bit of stick, my arm's aching. Let's have a look at it.
This fish turned out to be a short, plump mirror of over 20 pounds, but from its slow, sluggish fight, we thought it would be much larger. Dave was more than pleased when the scales registered around 24.5 pounds. His first 20-pounder from France.
Low 20.
40, 42...
24.8. 24.5. 24.5.
Hold on,
First
mate.
French carp. Not the iron reel, was it? I was just changing my rigs over, thinking they were wrong. And what happens?
11. Ready?
Yeah.
As the first fish from our new venue was returned, we all looked forward with anticipation to the possible sport that would follow.
Thank you, my little baby. Mwah. Yeah, perfect condition. Possibly never caught before. There he goes. Fabulous. Woo. Yeah.
Dave's fishing partner on this trip is Paul Booth, who has only been carp fishing for about a year and has yet to catch his first 20. At first, Steph and I set up in a double swim about 100 yards from Dave, and this was about 300 yards from Paul Regent and Ken Bishop. Steph and I decided on a baiting pattern between us, and we've prepared a rough sketch here to help illustrate it. The idea was to lay a path of baits diagonally across both swims, starting from the far side of the channel, the old river channel, coming right across and virtually into the margins on our bank. We were to cast hook baits into the line of free offerings, and the plan was, whether the carp came along close or along the old riverbed or beyond, they would find this line of baits and hopefully start feeding. The idea being to stop passing fish. Rather than catapult the baits out, we decided to do it by boat. So with me rowing, Steph was throwing them out at the back of the boat, and we went twice along the line, making a fairly wide path. On this lake, we have found the fishermen to be very friendly, and we soon were chatting to members of the local carp group. They told us that they'd found heavy baiting had not worked very well for them on this water. Although this method works well on occasions, Steph and I failed to connect with any fish, and the locals were proven right. But Ken, about 300 yards further along the bank, was enjoying some fantastic action. Ken was the first to take an upper 20, and he followed this up by catching two lovely doubles. The next day, Paul, who was using a marker for accuracy, was into an upper 20 himself. We joined Ken in Paul's swim just after the fish had been sacked. Paul was out in the dinghy retrieving his marker, which had been towed about 50 yards down the lake during the fight with the fish. The inevitable happened, and one of Paul's other rods went screaming off, while Paul was still a fair way from the bank. Ken had no choice but to strike the fish and start the fight. As soon as Paul came ashore, he handed the rod over to him, and Paul finished off landing a lovely common. Oh, it's common. It's common. Now that's a surprise, because it's fighting just like what the other one was. Going well, isn't it? Before. Well done, Ken. You knew that was going to happen, didn't you? Yeah. Well done, Ken. The beautifully scaled fish was quickly weighed and returned by Paul so that the big mirror could be dealt with. It was Paul Regent, of course, who discovered Lake Cassian for the British angler in the early 80s, and I've had the great pleasure of Paul's company on many fishing trips at home and abroad in the last 15 years. Paul's just had a run. He's struck. Looks like he's into a fish. Better go along and see if he needs a hand. Does it feel alright? It's not snagged or anything. Let us know if you feel any grating or anything. Does it feel alright? Unfortunately the fish has got snagged, so we're getting out in the boat as quick as we can. See if we can save Paul from losing this one. This is bound to be his first 20, so let's hope we can get it. Do you want to go down and have a look or not?
Yeah, I'll go in, mate. I'm going to go down and have a look.
I think Paul's going to...
There's a big cable down there.
He's going to see if he can see the fish. You sure about this?
Yeah.
He's a good swimmer, so have a little look. Whatever you do, don't pull the line too much when you get down there.
This water's warm.
Lift it up.
Snap me.
Oh, what a shame. What a shame. Paul's decided to swim back in because it's quicker. One of his other buzzers is making a few noises. Well, we're back here now. Unfortunately, the fish had got round a cable, Paul's fish, and that's mighty unlucky because he's been fishing for quite a few days now without a take. But that's carp fishing. We can just only hope that he gets another chance before we go. Ken and Paul were still getting action, and Steph and I thought it was wise to move nearer to them. Oh, that's a lovely fish. Linear scaled.
Heavy net, isn't it?
Very nicely done. The sign of a professional.
Well, I'm using the professional's bait. It's got it on my bag.
Well done, Paul.
Oh, it's a linear.
Any estimate of the size?
23.
That is very, very nice.
I'll tell you, two really pretty fish. Got it on the old WS specimens.
When you see a fish like that, that's what carp fishing is all about. And that's beautiful. Just look at that. Oh,
Right.
a truly handsome fish, that one.
Showing 26.12, so it's 26.5.
We moved about 100 yards closer to them, and I ended up in a very awkward swim that was heavily overgrown and very steep, but it was the only gap along the heavily wooded bank. At the same time, Dave and young Paul moved to the other side of the dynamic duo, who were by now taking the mickey out of us. Unfortunately, we had no action at all in the few remaining hours. But the next day was mine, with the first run coming out of the blue, right in the middle of eating breakfast. It's not a bad fish, it's certainly over 20. Initially the fish made two fast, short runs, taking about 30 yards of line, after which it was a dogged fight all the way back to the margins. I didn't see it then, how big was it? In my swim with an old oar.
Pass it back then.
I don't think I can reach it.
Of course you can.
What the? Oh, I wonder what that was. This is what you call a breakfast fish, right in the middle of the breakfast.
I've met it.
Don't go up there, Ken, because
Paul's cooking mine.
you'll see our half-eaten breakfast is...
I've met it.
You haven't? That's a reasonably good fish, isn't it? certainly an upper 20. Fighting well.
Oh yes, very nice.
I was pleased when my first French carp of the year finally came over the net. A very satisfying 27 pounder. Oh, it feels heavy. Oh, that's a 30. Lovely, 27 pounder French carp. Short but very fat. Paul had adopted a method that we had used extensively at Lake Cassian, which was to row out a baited terminal tackle while someone paid out line from the bank. Using this method allows you to concentrate your loose offerings around your hook bait at long range. This is of course a very successful method when fish are cruising in mid-water. It was shortly before the capture of my 27 that Steph and I had adopted this method. Right. It was to prove the downfall of a further 3 fish for me, but alas, nothing for Steph. The second fish caused quite a problem when, after a very long run, the line started to grate and eventually everything went solid, presumably around one of the snags on the old riverbed. We always have a boat handy in France for just this occasion. Steph rowed me out to the snagged fish and the fight was on yet again. Oh, it's just come off another snag now. The line's just flicked off a second snag. Another 20. Didn't like the bang on the boat then, did it? Got it in. After a short but hard scrap, the fish was netted, and Steph said he thought it might go 30, but I had my doubts.
I think that could be touching 30.
Might be 30. Well done, mate. Right, I'm going to step out, Steph, alright?
Yeah, hang on. Right.
Excuse my language. That is a nice fish. That's over 30.
The weight is 37. 37.
37 less the sling, yeah?
Yeah.
36 and a half. To everybody's amazement, the fish pulled the scales round to 36 and a half pounds, and after deducting the weight of the sling, a superb 36 pounder was presented to the cameras.
More, please. Great, got 2 boats in the background as well. See, what should we show it to them?
Regardez ce poisson, les filles.
We want you to turn it around and show you.
Quick.
Kev, they wanted you to show you.
Yeah, I know.
Regarde, regardez, regardez.
Hero!
Alright,
Vous avez vu? Certainement plein.
back it goes then.
There's no point in towards the bank, I should say.
Prior to rowing the baits out, we were fishing this area here. The edge of the old riverbed being about 80 yards from the bank we were fishing. This didn't produce any fish. We also tried casting baits into the old riverbed, but for some reason they too weren't picked up. Perhaps it was some foul bottom, we don't know why, but we think there were fish there, but they certainly wouldn't pick the baits up. The method that was working now, it was this area here. This is where we were rowing the baits out to, and this is where we were getting the action. If you visit France, you are likely to encounter the grass carp. They are a good fighter once over double figures, especially in the margins. It is a chub-like fish with a mouth similar to that of a mullet. The body is long and slender, which gives it fast acceleration, and a double is quite good fun to catch.
Yeah.
Just missed the cable. That might be me. Just like a torpedo. Lovely grass carp, about 10 pounds I would say. Very shallow bodied fish, but they've got a very wide back. If you look across the back, it's a very wide fish. The only problem is they're very difficult to hold. So when you see that in the water, you sometimes think it's an ordinary carp. A very unusual mouth. The tackle I've chosen for this trip consists of 3 Shimano long-range rods. They are the Diaflash 12-foot 3-pound test curve models fitted with silicon carbide rings, and these are spaced for long-range casting. The reels are my favourite. The Shimano GT 4000 Aero models. They have a good line capacity, a very smooth clutch, and of course the bait runner facility, which really comes into its own on waters like this where you get a lot of drag. The line is 11 pound breaking strain, and we always take a selection of different strengths if we're going to an unfamiliar water, usually ranging from £9 up to 20. Bite alarms should not be so sensitive so that the wind and drag sets them off. The ones I normally use are perfect. I know that when they sound, it is definitely a bite. As I'm fishing at long range with a fixed lead setup, I only need indicators that signal a drop back bite. Other than that, the indicators serve no real purpose, and on this occasion I'm using the swinging arm type, which drops back like so when a hooked fish is coming towards you. Right, now to the business end of the tackle. The first thing we have to consider is that carp in most French waters are not as difficult to catch as in most other countries where they are much more heavily fished for. So it pays to keep things very simple. Here I'm using a tangle-free nylon hook link of approximately 10 inches, coupled to a semi-fixed lead of 3 to 4 ounces. This rig incorporates 2 pieces of soft rubber tubing, which is pushed tight over the swivel. The lower one protects the hook link from possible damage caused by the lead. The one above semi-fixes the lead, so as far as the fish is concerned, it's a fixed lead setup. But what is vitally important in waters like this one, and many others in France, where the bottom of the lake might be snaggy and uneven, if the lead gets snagged, it will break away from the main swivel, thereby allowing the fish to take line, giving you a much better chance of success. Paul has caught more fish than anyone on this trip, so it's worth a look at his rig. It's not much different from ours. He's using a braided hook link. You can see he's using the tube below the swivel, again to protect the hook link material from the lead. Funnily enough, it's about the same length as what I was using, about 10 inches. And what Paul's done here, he's continued the braid through the eye of the hook to form the hair, and that hair's got a loop on the end, and it's put on the loop, the boilie is, and a stop inserted through the loop. The piece of tubing, the purpose of that is to make the hair come off the hook at that point rather than from the eye. And he's using a WS Specimen Hunter hook there. It's a very similar rig to what we're using. So, as we said before, nothing too complicated. We could show you much more complicated rigs, but in most situations in France at the moment, this would be completely unnecessary. The hooks I'm using are size 4 piggybacks for 20mm boilies, or size 8 for 15mm. Normally in France I use larger than average boilies, and if the water is particularly snaggy, I would use much stronger hooks than this, such as the Cassian model. For most of my carp fishing, I still prefer the original method of attaching the boilie to the hook. The boilie is first tied to a length of 2 break and strain nylon, which is then tied to the hook. I normally use a blood type knot just to attach it to the hook, but it's not important. Trim off the end. Now you'll notice there is a piece of silicone tube on the hook here. That's only so you can adjust the position of the hair attachment where it comes off the hook. You see it's holding it up there. If you move that up further, it can be coming off the eye. But all the fish I've caught on this trip, it's virtually come off the bottom of the bend of the hook. In this situation, there are 2 reasons for using a 2 hair rather than something like £1. The first is that it will withstand the the force of long-range casting. Secondly, it will withstand fish mucking around with the bait that would normally snap a hair when you're using, say, a 4-ounce fixed lead. It's particularly important on this water when you've got a lot of grass carp mouthing the bait. And really, it's as simple as that. This is certainly a marvellous place. Lovely countryside, lots of wild animals, hawks flying around. And just along the bank from me at the moment, there's a couple of lovely butterflies. They could be swallowtail butterflies, but I couldn't be 100% sure. We should always remember when tackling a big water like this that one of the most important aspects is accurate location of fish. At any time, 3/4 of the water could be completely devoid of carp, and what a thought, being perhaps half a mile from the nearest fish. We've got to remember, accurate location means continued observation, splitting up into groups, talking to other anglers for information, looking for signs of fish feeding like coloured water, following the wind, use of the sonar, and of course pure watercraft. It's all of these things that will help you locate the fish and bring you success. Don't be tempted on arrival to pick the most attractive looking swims, no matter what they might contain. However, attractive looking swims do occasionally produce, and you might be lucky enough to get the best of both worlds. One point worth mentioning about boats: where the water is shallow, continual use of a boat can scare the fish away. However, on a lake like this, where water sports are a main feature, the carp seem to take no notice of a boat at all. But it's worth remembering, if there's not a lot of watercraft on your lake, try not to continually use a boat in depths of, say, less than 15 feet. Alternative methods of baiting, such as using a throwing stick, can be very effective, with baits being put out at long range quite accurately. However, some people still prefer the old trusty catapult. Following the capture of the 36-pounder, I took 2 more doubles in quick succession, whilst Paul also continued to get further action. Unfortunately, Steph was still without a fish, and so was Dave's partner, Paul. Steph was doing nothing wrong. The fish were in a fairly tight area out of his reach, and there was nothing we could do about it. The only choice we had was to move across the lake some half a mile to an area where we had seen some early morning activity. This was a sandy beach area, popular with swimmers and sunbathers. To be able to tackle big waters like these, you need to be able to cast at least 90 yards. And I'll show you the directly overhead cast, which is the way I prefer. And I'm going to use a fairly short drop from the rod tip of about 2.5 feet. At this stage, make sure the rod is directly overhead and look back and make sure that the boilie is very near to the ground so that you get maximum swing. This is the starting position. Make sure that the reel and the rings are pointing directly upwards. If they are to one side, this will restrict the line flow. Don't snatch the rod. As you push forward with your right hand, pull back with your left. You do not need a lot of effort, it's just the technique. So here we go. Keep the rod pointing up in the air so that the line can flow nicely from the rod tip. Now that was very little effort, but that went about 100 yards. If you want to use a marker, this is the way it's normally done. A large polystyrene ball or float, tied to light nylon, a lead or a stone at the other end. What's two important things we must say about this. First of all, you must use a light line. If you use 6, 10, 12 pound line and your fish gets tangled up with it, you could lose the fish. We tend to use 1 to 2 pound line. And the other thing is, of course, you'd normally need a boat to put this out, and you'd need to adjust it while you're out there to more or less the exact depth. Apart from that, using markers is fairly straightforward. But I would like to say one final thing. When you've finished fishing, you should go out there and remove them, because it's almost as if it's litter in the lake. Last time I went to Lake Cassian, I saw over 100 markers left behind by anglers. So when you finish, just go out and collect the marker. Unfortunately, Steph, who much prefers a traditional style of carp fishing, found that close to medium range tactics didn't produce the results that we got at long range. He did enjoy some sport, however, but lost a biggie on some snags, despite being helped by a French boatman.
Go, didn't you?
Keep it coming. Oh, this net's heavy in the water, isn't it? Well done. £15.6.
Yeah.
Well done.
Over the moon.
Stays you off.
Tell you what, it felt massive when I first hooked it. It just literally just lunged off very slowly. I couldn't touch it. I was trying to get down the bank at the same time under that tree. I can't quite run off the back.
I think it was tied up for a little while, wasn't it?
Yeah! That's what we call action. If you get on these fish, it's easy. Just getting on them, isn't it? These fish are both caught within about 15 minutes of each other. What French fishing can really be all about. 13 and a half. And 28. Carp sardine sandwich.
Go out a little bit, yeah, it'll help. It's either a very big fish or it's caught on one of the other lines. I think it's on one of the other lines. Not that big, is it? Size it looks. Another line, isn't it? Got the cod in it. Well done.
$23.2.
Look happy. My shadow was on it. I can't get the end of it. Tell me when you've done it.
Here he goes.
Whoa. Don't wake the others up.
£30.6, look at that.
That milk coming out then? Is the milk pouring out?
Oh, lovely fish.
Back tail pull, so oars in the way, that's it.
The third one on top of your head.
29.2.
29.2.
29.2.
Backwards pull.
And the baby. He's probably going to have most to say.
Yeah, that's a better colour.
It's a nice looking fish.
Can you push the sack down off the other fish bowl? With your other head.
20, what's this one? 20?
21 and a half.
21 and a half.
Down a bit, Paul.
Back in, that's it.
Oh.
Down a bit, Paul.
Oh,
On your leg. Move your leg. You fish the tail.
that's all right.
Can you row me base? Why are you doing that?
Paul's tempting
Good shot if you can get it out.
Right? Right, the top one's going back.
That's the actress. It's
It's a little... That way.
No, done that way.
No, it's going my way. Oh, lovely. Well, all good things must come to an end, and this is our 7th and final day. In a few hours' time we'll be making tracks for England, and I don't suppose it'll be long before we're planning our next trip. I've been recording everybody's fish, and I reckon it's been a real success with regard to making the video and field testing the new Maestro boilies. The most successful flavours have been ultra bird spice and honey nectar. We've had more than 25 20s, including 6 lovely 30s up to 38.4, plus numerous enjoyable doubles. In fact, we've had more than 1,500 pounds of carp on our very first trip to the water. We've enjoyed the fishing. We hope you've enjoyed this video. Au revoir. plunking. Oh, that's good.
Here's your up back
Oh,
though.
no, mate.
Between 26 and a half and 26 and 3/4.
Absolutely amazing. Last rod out.
All week.
Well done, mate. Pictures? What an end to the trip. Steph's been fishing really hard all week. Deserved to fish every day, never got one. Did lose one yesterday. Today we've packed up, one rod out, Steph said, and off it goes. Absolutely amazing. Justice is done. That's carp fishing.
What?
I suppose you can't.
What are you doing? How far are you going up my leg? Bang it up!
What was that about Rick and Mortis?
That's how I always say that to my kids when they play me up. Bang it up! That's what they say. They answer me back. They're up the stairs going, bang it up. Worth plodding on, wasn't it?
Can we see a little bit more of the body or? Lovely. Smashing, well done, mate.
That's it, I've been